Hello everybody. My name is David Tindall. I am CEO and founder of TalkStraight and Schools Broadband. Before we start, I'd really just like to get a quick show of hands as to who is representing a primary school to start off with today. Anybody just doing a primary school? Yeah, anybody secondary school and multi-academy trusts? Okay, so lots of maths in here today. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So a quick agenda of what I'm going to be talking about today. So a quick intro to us. My marketing team always says I have to talk about us a little bit no matter where we go. The DFE broadband standards, which were released around about 12 months ago. The latest DFE gigabit connectivity scheme as well, and how that could impact some of you here. Changing broadband technologies. What was the past? What's the present? Where's that going in the future as well? And in particular, very good timing following an AltNet. But the rise of the AltNets as well, the new technology they are deploying, and ultimately what that means for all of you here, as well as councils and map procurement. And potentially, if we have time, then a quick discussion on the big PSTN switch off come the end of 2025. What I would say is we will have time for questions at the end, but I do like my presentations to be interactive. If I don't get any questions during when I'm speaking, I'm thinking people aren't interested in what I'm talking about. So if you do want to ask a question at any point, please just raise your hand, and I'd love to get people's opinions as we're speaking as well. So a little bit about us. So TalkStraight Group founded in 2007, revenues of about 12 million. We're a specialist education internet service provider. I believe the second largest in the UK behind only RM. At the moment, we are an ISP with our own network, including lots of nice interconnects into content providers such as Google, BBC, Microsoft, etc. 70 staff to look after all of you, and 275 MATs we currently look after, and a number of local authorities broadband provision as well. But most importantly, we've also been members of the Internet Watch Foundation for probably the best part of 10 years, I think it is now. I'd like to be actively involved in that. We're also based in Leeds, hence why I'm here today in particular. It's nice to see some customers from Leeds here as well. We look after about 150 schools, being the largest provider in Leeds, as well as being multi-award winning for a number of security content filtering services, which we add in our value add bundle. As I said, we're definitely a specialist map provider in the country. We have some of the largest maps in the UK use our services, such as Star Multi-Academy Trust, the Oasis Community Learning Trust, which I believe has the largest SD-WAN solution of any educational multi-academy trust in the UK, as well as Red Kite, who are local to here, and also the GFL schools as well. So a real specialist map provider. That's enough about us. On to the DFE broadband standards. I'm presuming everybody's heard of the DFE broadband standards here. Yes? A few nods? Excellent, okay. Well, I sat on that steering group with a number of other ISPs and the DFE as well. It was really interesting thrashing out what those standards were going to be. But ultimately, the DFE took everybody's thoughts and put them together as what they saw should be the standards going forward. And there's a big drive to fibre. I'm sure everybody probably understands why that is. It's much faster, it's much more reliable. But the DFE are really trying to push that into all schools at the moment. And there's a number of different ways to get your hands on that as it stands at the moment, which I'll come into in a moment. But ultimately, the DFE are mandating, although you don't have to do what they say, but they are certainly at least advising that all schools should have a fibre-based connection, all primary schools, sorry, should have a primary-based connection, and that should be a minimum of 100 meg download and 30 meg upload. They don't talk about any committed or guaranteed speeds on that. They just say that's the speeds that you should be able to achieve when most of the time when taking a fibre-based connection. They are really trying to push people away from copper, as is the industry in general, of course, at the moment as well. Secondary schools should be on at least a gigabit capable bearer. So that will be effectively a lease line service where you've got the same speeds, upload and download, and you have guaranteed speeds on there as well. So this is where we actually see the FTTP, unless they come with a higher SLA or guaranteed speeds on there, really isn't the right technology for secondary schools. That should be a dedicated lease line, as we see all of our secondary schools use hundreds and hundreds of meg every single day, all day, every day, and particularly when you have large events such as sporting events, etc., where we really see the amount of pressure put on ISP's network go up with an absolute wallop. But also, most importantly, and actually this is something we don't see a lot of at the moment. I would say we have less than 5% of our customers take a backup broadband connection. You think, well, why, Dave? Why, Dave, is that you're not offering the right solution? And I think the fundamental is that we do offer that, and we do push that to our customers, and we really do recommend that they have it, because things do happen, things go wrong. It happens to any ISP, any carrier. It will happen at some point. But still, the vast majority of the schools we have at the moment don't use backup connections. I really wish they did. It will get themselves out of a pickle, and it's just another standard of insurance. But certainly the DFE are really trying to push all schools to have a backup broadband connection. And it doesn't cost a lot now. You can get backup broadband connections over 4G or 5G just for your MIS services for, say, £15, £20 a month, which will quite happily fit into an SD-WAN based solution as well. But I really do implore you that it will happen to your school one day. It's just a matter of time as to when it does. And that people will come knocking on your network manager's doors as and when the internet isn't working, of course. But why fiber? Why FTTP? And why the new standards? Ultimately, the less faults. We have about an eighth of the amount of faults on fiber as we currently do on copper. So it's much more reliable service. It's also future-proof and faster. I'll talk about the technologies in a second, but you can go up to best part of 10 gig currently using FTTP and fiber. There's also dark fiber services, which we can get to 100 gig, or you can light it up at whatever speeds you want. But there's a lot. The fiber is just an enabler of digital services in your schools. It also has much lower latency. So from that, you will see increased application performance as well, as more schools go more cloud-based. Not just a fast connection, but that lower latency will really help enhance the end user experience which you have. Has everybody agreed with those DFE broadband standards? Does anybody not agree with them? Everyone agrees with them, right? Okay.
The backup one is always just the cost. And if you've got a resilient, robust connection that's been in for a substantial amount of time, say up to 3 years, why would you? That's the challenge.
I completely agree with you, and I think it's insurance is what it is at the end of the day.
DFE is part of the conversation, but they didn't take it out. So it's a good recommendation to have it in, but most schools can't afford it. They haven't got a very good reason to do it. Why spend money on something which may never use?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the argument which I see quite often as well. Yes, sir, at the back.
The other issue I've seen with backup broadband is typically we run back to the same exchange centre.
Yeah.
I've got, so my primary data centre, the nearest exchange centre is 200 metres next door.
Mm-hmm.
It cost me 15 grand for a 3 kilometre fibre brand to the next exchange.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. I think where you can use alternative carriers, which again comes into what we're saying, and our friends down here at Freedom Fibre. So yes, one more quickly before I move on to the next slide.
It can be used a bit like fire prevention, fire protection. Spend a lot of money for something you hope you're never going to have to use.
Absolutely.
Schools do drills, everything in the event of fire, and you just. But it is, maintaining fire extinguishers and all that is very expensive. It's just being aware.
It is. I think it's also what you use it for as well. So the gentleman at the back made a very good point. 2 lease lines is an incredibly expensive solution to have, and we do have schools that do that, and some multi-academy trusts. Oasis do. They take 2 lease lines into different carriers to give that specifically. But again, it depends as to how long you anticipate also being without broadband for, how long that could take. Yes, quickly, if that's okay.
The other one as well is that the ubiquity of the mobile phone that everybody has, that also is taking away that urgency around that solution. I mean, MIS, most schools now are on cloud, unless you're still with our old friends. And you can actually run a school safely off a personal mobile phone. Not best practice because the data on it, but it still is a secure backup route in that operation of the school.
Yes, I think so. Although we have tried to say that occasionally to schools that is the case when their internet's down, and the reply we get from them isn't particularly nice. I must admit, but you are right. Technically, then you can do that absolutely. So the DFE Gigabit Connectivity Scheme. So the precursor to this was something called the Rural Gigabit Connectivity Scheme, where the DFE connected circa 450 rural primary schools who were really the worst served in the country, where I think they were sub 10 meg, generally speaking, and up to about 40 meg. 99% of those contracts were given to BT Openreach, so that could be wholesale then to any other ISPs such as ourselves or RM or other competitors as well. I think we won probably about 50 schools I think we provided service to on that scheme. But there's now a replacement one which is currently out for tender. This is called the DFE Gigabit Connectivity Scheme. Initially, that was going to be for around about 3,400 schools, and that was going to come out around about a year ago, but the DFE essentially stopped it and started again. The new version of that is for around about 840 schools, where these are the worst served in the country. I think there's about 8 lots which are currently for tender to different carriers, and whichever carriers win those different tenders, they're all geographically around the UK. There's quite a lot in North Yorkshire specifically as well, but whoever wins has to wholesale that network to other providers such as myself, such as RM, such as EXA, for example, as well. So you're not going to be locked into that specific carrier, as they have to wholesale it to third-party ISPs, which I think is a great idea by the DFE as well. I do expect some altnets are going to win that. I do. I think, again, over Freedom Fibre, they just won one for Shropshire. I think specifically as well to connect a lot of schools up there, which is a great win for them. So I don't think all of them are going to go to Openreach this time. I think we will start to see a lot more altnets come along. So I do have that secret list. I'm not allowed to give it out as it stands at the moment because it's going through a tender process. But if you want to know if your school is on it, please do come and ask me, and I'll be able to tell you or not. So this is what we're moving from predominantly. This is for primary schools. Is something called FTTC, also known as VDSL or superfast broadband. This is the more the was and have now to some extent, where from the local telephone exchange, you get a piece of fibre, go into your local green, lovely street cabinet, and then you'd have your normal copper telephone line going from your local cabinet back to your school. The issue with this kind of solution, including GFast, which is a little known technology, which goes a bit faster than FTTC, is that ultimately it's distance dependent. So that the longer that orange line, the slower your speeds are ultimately. It's also a contended service as well. The SLAs aren't as good as fibre. It's not as reliable as fibre either. But this is what we're moving away from. But still, a lot of your schools will probably have at the moment to some extent. And this is what it's been replaced with. FTTP on the whole around the country. This is where it's fibre all the way to the junction box or to the telegraph pole. Different carriers, different altnets use different ways to get it in, but it's effectively fibre all the way back to the exchange or back to another street cabinet, which is what City Fibre do. They have street cabinets around a specific town. They have mini exchanges, so to speak, where they take all of the fibre back to. And here's some lovely ways as to how to identify it as well. My wife and daughter can even identify this now when I go around in there and say, look, Sophie, what's that? And she goes, GPON, Daddy. Oh, I was so proud, so proud. So you can actually see we have a GPON splitter in the middle here. That's the black device. This is for BT Openreach. Other altnets may vary, but effectively they are put on poles and fibre run to that GPON splitter, then off to houses or schools, etc. Overhead, or more commonly, they also go underground as well. Different altnets use different ways of doing that, but ultimately there is always some disruption when putting in fibre, and also it can sometimes take a while to do as well. But that's fundamentally what you'll see and how to identify, one way how to identify FTTP in your area. And these are the devices that you'll actually see installed into your property as well. Left is old, super fast, broadband, FTTC, a copper with a splitter on the end of it. On the right-hand side is a PON unit, which is effectively terminate an FTTP-based connection. That's one of the new ones by Openreach. The old ones have got battery backups in them, etc. as well. But that's the difference that you'll actually see if you place an order for one of those services. And here's something on the speeds available as well. I spoke briefly about FTTC. 80 meg download, 20 meg upload, absolute tops. And that's if you're literally right next to the telephone exchange, the Green Street cabinet. GPON, this has already actually been replaced by XGS-PON. So GPON, which is one of those black devices which you saw on top of the street cabinet, on top of the pole or underground, that can do a maximum of 2.5 gig download and 1.25 gig upload. Much better than FTTC, I'm sure you'll agree. But they are still contended with the amount, that bandwidth is contended between all those people connected to that GPON. Now, currently the usage is still so low that doesn't really make much of an impact on a lot of customers. But this is one of the reasons why XGS-PON is at the forefront now. Now, and OpenReach, just so everyone knows, currently they're only deploying GPON. That's all they're doing. They're not doing XGS-PON yet, which will give the altnets a big advantage, as the majority of them going forward are using XGS-PON. And XGS-PON can run it up to currently 10 gig download. The norm is 10 gig download, 2.5 gig upload, but XGS-PON 2 will do 10 gig download, 10 gig upload as well. You're seeing that from the likes of Freedom Fiber, Virgin Media O2, and they're now deploying FTTP, the Tomnia, ITS, and a point from my friend Rick down here.
Yeah, it's probably worth saying we're an XGS-PON based organisation, quite new. The contention, though, is something that can be negotiated. It's not specific. So with fibre optic cable, obviously the transmission medium is light, and different customers use different frequencies of light. So you can have everybody running at on different light frequencies. Generally, what we're doing, we install commercial premises or into a school premises. The pricing varies on how much contention you want, really. So if you want a full dedicated 10 gig line, you can have that. And it literally is a configuration item. It doesn't require any digging up. It doesn't require different equipment. It's just configuration, basically. So
yeah, absolutely right. I'm glad that came from you because it's just on my thunder. But never mind. You're right. You can deliver lots of different services over here. And although in theory there are those contended with how much physically they can do, they are able to restrict the bandwidth and the profiles of certain customers, so you can guarantee those bandwidths or have a lesser bandwidth as well. I think there's still some debate in the ISP world, which we'll see in the future, actually, as to if an FTTP or maybe an EO FTTP is even actually going to be good enough for a primary connection for a secondary school as well.
Well, you'll know we're launching a product in that area to beat BT's traditional sort of.
It's going to eat
over FTP.
Absolutely, it's going to massively eat into what BT's revenue.
That's cheaper as well.
Yeah, it is a damn sight cheaper. Absolutely, it is. But you have all of the innovators such as Freedom Fiber, ITS, Tomnia, 55, and Virgin Media O2 now installing XGS-PON. So this is just around the corner, and you're going to start to see a lot more of this over the next couple of years as well. So whatever you do, don't lock yourself into 5-year contracts on FTTC with your incumbent. Number one, they're going to have to change it to something called SAGIA, which I'll come to in the future. So you're going to have a technology change, which may be a bit of an annoyance for everybody anyway. But you're also going to miss out on this fantastic new technology, which is going to be delivered and is being delivered now throughout the country. I can't be vocal enough on don't sign 5-year FTTC contracts as a stand, or at least have the option to get out to be able to upgrade mid-contract term. That is something we do, by the way, but I would hope that other suppliers would do as well. Any questions on the different speeds and the technologies available? No. One more thing just to add to that, there are other versions of PON as well, which are just coming out. Nokia released 40 gig PON. I think there's going to be 100 gig PON as well. I forget the exact terminology, if it's XGS Super PON or whatever. But again, you're going to see even faster speeds. And ultimately, this is going to drive down the costs of lease lines. I see in my magic crystal ball, in 18 months' time, I don't think you will buy anything less than a gig on a lease line. Just as we did with 100, when it went 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, all of a sudden it was just 100. No one did any less. You're going to see the same thing on a gig in 18 months. You're going to see the cost of 10 gig lease lines come down to counter the likes of Rick and Tomnia and everybody else as well. So I think great things are coming from a connectivity point of view. So again, when you're contracting, look to be as flexible as you can with that so you can take advantage and you're not stuck in a slow lane or using more expensive 10 gig EADs and things like that as well. So Rise of the AltNets. So did you know there are now over 100 AltNets in the UK? That is 100 different fibre networks, 100 different billing systems, 100 different support desks, 100 different raft of engineers going around the country trying to install FTTP wherever they can. From my point of view, I really don't think that's sustainable. We've already started to see some of those go bust or being taken over. I think Broadway was a good example, I think, based in Wales. It basically went pop and had to get bought by another company, by the administrators. I am convinced that you're going to see more of those as well. So although the AltNets have a very big technical advantage, I think you also need to be careful as to who you will procure with and buy from in the future as well. Just to back that up as well, you also see a lot of consolidation. So 100 carriers is just not sustainable. It's not going to happen. I'm sure you may, depending if you're interested in it or not, of course, remember what happened with NTL and with Telewest and all of the cable companies. There were dozens and dozens of cable companies around the UK installing their cable in the ground. Also, yeah, we've borrowed loads of money. We're going to build loads of networks, isn't it brilliant? And they all forgot about the customers, generally speaking. Didn't bring a lot of them on. And they were all aggregated eventually down into Virgin Media O2 as it stands today. That will happen again with fibre networks. Absolutely nailed on. We've just seen it in the last 3 months. For example, Firm Capital put a lot of money into a number of startup ISPs, Giganet, Swish, and Jurassic, are now getting rid of all those 3 brands and merging them all into one. I think a lot of this has been driven by inflation rates, war in UK, in Ukraine, etc. as well, which has basically meant that the borrowing that all of the AltNets have done, the debt on that is unsustainable, I think, going forward. At the current rates, we'll see where inflation goes and interest rates in the end as well. But that's why you're going to see that. So for some, it's quite a dangerous time. And you now see a lot of announcements, actually, where a lot of, well, some, I'd say, a decent amount at least, of those AltNet carriers are actually starting to stop building or ramping down their building plans. They're actually saying, well, you know what, we've not got the money now to go off and invest. Let's actually go off and get some customers on our network. I think looking at that, I would probably say, well, why didn't you get the customers whilst you were building? And having a focus on that. So I find that a very poor excuse when I hear that from CEOs of AltNets, I must admit. But again, that's what they're focusing on at the moment as well. And they're trying to figure out, well, how can we go out and get more customers? What do we need to do to go off and do that? Do we just sell direct? And some of them are just selling direct, or do some of them go via partner models? And I think you will see a lot of AltNets going down that partner route. So, for example, we are currently in the process of bringing Freedom Fibre online, and I assure you it is purely coincidence that actually Rick is here today from Freedom Fibre. I didn't realise he was Chris's brother until Chris said, could Rick have a couple of minutes speaking and questions at the end? I had no idea who Rick was. But we've since found out, yes, Rick does work for Freedom. But you will see, so the likes of City Fibre are really starting to push their partner model and partner with them as well. And Insomnia, they will push their partner model as well, because ultimately it's going to allow them to fill their network up much quicker than they can do that on their own by working with partners, which is why also Virgin and BT also have their partner models as well. But you're going to see, I would hope you would see, in part from your ISPs, different providers coming on net that they can deliver to you, in particularly in certain geographic areas. Currently, 57% of the UK can now get FTTP. 78% can now get gigabit if you are on Virgin's DOCSIS network. Ofcom anticipates a 93% hit of FTTP by March 2026. So there's been a lot of building, and there still will be going forward as well. But ultimately, I think the message is it's coming. Get ready for it and take advantage of it where you can. Some FTTP can also have higher SLAs and bandwidth guaranteed as well. So it's not quite as contended as the old FTTC was. So you can now buy, you're seeing already from some of the AltNets, something called a committed information rate, which is, for example, you can buy an 8 gig FTTP service and they'll guarantee 3.3 gig on that for you. You're saying, well, okay, that's still cheaper than a gig lease line, and you're guaranteeing me 3.3 gig on there compared to a gig lease line. what should I do? What should I look at? Should I really take this FTTP stuff seriously or not? My view is I think you definitely should do. And again, you'll see your lease line prices come down. It's definitely going to happen. What I would say, though, is that having 100 AltNets based around the country is a flipping nightmare for me. The reason being is I've got to plug into, generally speaking, 100 different networks to take advantage of them. Now, that's as of today, or maybe certainly six months ago, but what we are seeing is, and certainly my strategy is I will be partnering with those much larger AltNets, such as Freedom Fibre, such as City Fibre, such as Netomnia, so we can take advantage of their networks. And I would say as well that if there's a network being built in a specific part of the country you wish us to use, then we'll quite happily speak with that AltNet. But again, it's going to be about scale, and I think you're going to see a lot more aggregators as well. So TalkTalk, for example, are going to be reselling a lot more services from City Fibre, from Freedom Fibre, from others as well. So you can use them as aggregators. There are pros and cons of that, which I'll come to in a moment, but that will be another way to access those networks. So should my school use an AltNet? What do you think, Rick? Yes, no?
Absolutely.
Yes, of course they should do. Absolutely. And I think they're great for individual schools right now, hence why the DFE has got their new procurement, which is going out at the moment. For all of these reasons here, your price is going to go down. You're going to get faster speeds on there, much more bang for your buck. They'll also offer synchronous speeds, a lot of them as well. So same speed upload and download like a lease line would, whereas BT is currently asynchronous. So the max BT currently do, although this is going to change shortly, is a gig download and 220 meg upload. You can't get a faster upload speed, but that's one of the differences again between GPON and XGS-PON. XGS-PON you can. And from my point of view, I've got the stats on this, looking after over 2,500 schools and maps, is every day of a week, an FTTP connection will outperform a 100 meg lease line, and it is near enough as reliable as well. Do not waste your money on 100 meg lease lines or 100 on a gig lease line for primary schools when FTTP is available, so long as you can either have a higher SLA on that or you have a backup circuit as well. FTTP will outperform a 100 meg lease line every day of the week. And you look at the prices for, say, where a gig FTTP is compared to a 100 meg lease line is, with all of your content filtering, security, etc., bundled in as I and my competitors do, and it will come out more competitive or a similar price. It really, really will. I urge you all to go off and look at that. Yes, that's the fastest at the moment. I know you can't believe it, but some can actually offer a whopping 8 gig upload and download at the moment. Can you imagine talking about that 4 years ago, or when I was at the last Edgy Geek? One, it really has come a long way, and you're only going to see it get faster and faster. I would also say that the AltNet prices, they're generally better than BT and Virgin. BT is obviously regulated. Virgin follow what BT do effectively, but those AltNets, we're already seeing it now, are being more competitive. We normally see by between 20 to 15% there or thereabouts. But remember, it's not all good with AltNets. There are some issues and some things that you need to be aware of if you're going to go off and use them. Rick can give some context to this afterwards, as I'm sure he may not agree with everything, but still, that's the good thing about debate. We do find that with some carriers, particularly when they are digging the streets themselves, that the transition can be painful and long and slow. And you need to really have a backup plan. I would not recommend you go off and use an AltNet where they've got 2 months to install and you've got a hard cutoff from your current provider, because unless you can have some flexibility with that provider, and this is something we see in the education industry quite a lot, is there's that hard cutoff from the contract point of view. You can't extend it by 30 days. So if you're going to go off and need some physical building to be done where they literally dig up the streets, particularly if you've got to cross a road or anything like that, I think 2 months, even 3 months sometimes is tricky to go off and do. What I would say though is that if you're using a pole and you're going overground, or you already have the majority of the work done in the ducting and those chambers which I showed you before, they already exist, then it's much more likely that it is going to get installed on time. But you really got to keep your eyes open and manage those contracts really, really, really well. Again, many AltNets currently only sell direct, or they have very few partners. So if you're a multi-academy trust, and again, we work with some of the largest in the UK, and they take an MPLS or a VPLS wide area network from us, which is commonplace that we see, your provider might not be able to use them, because ultimately they've got to be able to link into them and buy off them a specific way, something called a layer 2 connection compared to layer 3. And if you're interested in that, we've got time, I'll tell you about that in the future. But ultimately, for me to connect a Freedom Fiber, for example, to my network, I need to take a layer 2 connection and a physical cable into them into one of my data centers. Again, it's an expensive thing to do. It's all about scale. I know I've got a partner and drive numbers. If I put one connection in to Rick's network, I will lose thousands of pounds for putting on one school. So a lot of it's about scale. And again, you'll find the larger ones, such as ourselves, EXA, Wave9, who are here today, will probably be able to do that. But a lot of the smaller providers probably won't be able to do that, or they'll only be able to buy layer 3 from them. So they won't be able to put that into a big MPLS or VPLS wide area network, which means you're stuck with their incumbent. And again, I think that there's a very good chance over time AltNets are going to get bought out and consolidated into others as well. That's ultimately going to mean change for you. It may mean change in IP addresses. It might not do as well. But again, that's going to be a risk, I think, going forward in the future. Also, make sure you take an enhanced SLA on that. It goes without saying that everyone's digital strategies are more, the internet is more and more important for them. So sometimes cheap is cheap for a reason, is you don't get those SLAs. And I have seen even with BT where SLAs aren't taken, a couple of nightmares with FTTP. They are fringe cases, they really are, but they still do happen, unfortunately. Also, if you take a council offering, then it's highly unlikely they are going to be able to take advantage of AltNets. If they're in contract, say for a 5-year or a 7-year contract with, let's just say, for example, let's just say, I don't know, Capita, for example. And please, if I'm wrong in what I say, I apologize to Capita, but they're one of those companies out there I know have done a lot in the past, is that if they're locked in with, say, Virgin for 7 years, and therefore the council's locked in for Virgin for 7 years, which means that if you have the AltNets build in those 7 years, they can't use them, and you can't use them as well unless you want to buy 2 internet connections. So again, think very carefully as to your choice of provider in the future, and if you are going to be locked into using a specific underlying carrier during your contract, as you will be less flexible, I think, otherwise, with what you can and what you can't do. I think also, if you go out and procure and do it yourself, if you go out and you are, I know, let's say a 30 site MAT, for example, or even a 10 site MAT, and your schools are all over the country, and you go, great, I've got an AltNet there, I've got Jurassic there, I've got Freedom there, I've got City Fibre there, I've got Schools Broadband there, I've got Virgin there, I've got EXA there, I've got Wave9 there, is you're going to have to manage those relationships with all of those different providers as well, which are different support numbers, different portals, different overall arching visibility of what's actually going on with all of them. And it makes life quite difficult for you to go off and look after. I believe, again, by us putting that all into one portal and managing effectively all of those underlying carrier relationships adds a lot of value. And I think specifically because the likes of ourselves and EXA and Wave9 have got considerable buying power with those carriers. So what that means is we have a higher levels of support in there, and we can escalate, because ultimately we spend a lot more money with them than an individual school can do, or sometimes some councils do as well. And that's just a size of scale more than anything else on the service, and being able to get things to actually happen if there are any issues, as well as having more attractive commercials, of course, as well, because the likes of Freedom Fibre and other AltNets, they're not regulated by Ofcom to an extent when it comes to pricing. They can price it near enough of whatever they want to do, whereas BT can't. I'd also recommend you look at those that can use the DFE accredited procurement options as well, which will safeguard you to making sure that you are using an internet service provider and potentially an AltNet of choice as well. All those companies have to sign up to a specific standard. So again, the 2 frameworks that schools can currently procure from, which are DFE certified frameworks for broadband, are the Yorkshire Purchasing Organisation, or YPO, their telecommunications connectivity framework, and also a new one, which is snappily called RM6116, which is a Crown Commercial Services framework, replacing the even snappier RM3808, which was purely for schools, but now is for government in general. On both of those frameworks, you can do your own tendering, mini competition between lots of providers who are on those frameworks. I think there's over 40 on RM6116, but you can also do direct awards as well. So if you don't want to go through a huge tender process, you can direct award from there. And that's then down to your own procurement as to how your trust or your school wishes to do, but you can do direct awards. You don't have to go out to tender. The value has already been shown by the companies getting onto those frameworks. Right, I make it that I've got 12 minutes left, so I propose I probably don't go into the 21 CN and PSTN switch off, but we'll see how, depending on how many more questions I get. So I'd like to invite Rick to answer any of those questions as well. Likewise, if my friends at EXA or NINET or WaveNet also wish to chip in with their opinions on anything as well, then please feel free to do so. Although now you're going to tell me there's no questions from anybody. Yes, Adam.
You've talked a lot about the end connections, the last mile or the first mile, depending on which way you look at it. What are ISPs like yourselves doing at your infrastructure end, your backhaul, to take on these much faster connections?
We're upgrading, ultimately. We're actually in the process, this is one of the question, we're actually in the process of upgrading our network to 100 gig ports into all of our carriers. That includes into Google, into Microsoft, got dark fiber ring, specifically around the country to be able to look to deal with that and pass traffic where we need to. It's really important that we invest in that. I think likewise as well for you guys being able to filter and do security on those big 8 gigs worth of bandwidth for say sub 3.5 grand, and you've got to do SSL decryption on that, or IPS or IDS on top of that as well. You've got to really think about how you're going to do that, and can your current boxes take that or not? And that's actually that's a bigger problem for you than actually just going with the bandwidth. But yes, Adam, we just invested another $250,000 into our core network infrastructure, which we're currently deploying to specifically support 100 gig NNIs into all of these different carriers. And likewise, I know some of our competitors are doing the same as well. 10 gig is dead, 100 gig is the way forward in carrying on. Yes, sir.
In terms of supporting the primary side, particularly around filtering and provision, are you seeing them move away from buying a filtered service to just a broadband service and an alternative filtering, or are you still saying that seeing primarily with primary schools that they're sticking with a filtered service?
I'd say over 95% of our customers, in fact probably 98%, I think, are still buying a bundled provision of security, content filtering, and connectivity under there. There are exceptions to that. I think we just won the Multi-Academy Trust. We're doing 35 DIAs for the public schools. I think on all of them, or they've already had them historically in the past. But no, we find that we can add a lot of value, I believe, to particularly those big multi-academy trusts where you have a single pane of glass and you have the security and the firewalling embedded in the network, which allows the customers to take advantage of the technology and also the costs as well as those already exist. So that's what we currently see as it stands at the moment. I do think that you will start to see more customers take SD-WAN, where it actually makes the ISP slightly less important in the grand scheme of things, but there's still pros and cons of an SD-WAN versus a VPLS. We do both. My view is still VPLS and MPLS, I think, is more cost effective and better than putting boxes everywhere on site, even though we do that as well. We can't be fortunate and we just deliver that to the latest, which is 110 baselines. But at the end of the day, you've got to give the customer what they want.
I've got 100 school sites with SD-WAN.
Fantastic. Yeah, and then you know what, the Fortinet SD-WAN solution is absolutely fantastic. When you look at the manager in particular, how you're going to deploy that, and you just don't have the advantage of the ISP's network and interconnects into other content providers.
But freedom, but
yeah, absolutely, yes. But yeah, you've got a great solution. It's a shame we didn't deliver it to you, but anyway, there you go. Any more questions? Oh,
Do you do anything other than the connectivity, the filtering, monitoring?
with what regards to safeguarding, for example?
I just mean broader, adding more bandwidth to.
I think adding more bandwidth and having the applications rely on that guaranteed bandwidth is a big thing for ISPs. I don't think it's just a general selling point, it's a general advantage of using ISPs rather than providers that purely just buy the connectivity from another provider and pass it on. So, for example, I could go off and buy an internet connection from Virgin with Virgin's IPs on it, they're not touching my network, and it costs similar to what I do at the moment when I buy it. But it gives us the advantage of being able to move traffic around on our network and guarantee traffic, particularly into third parties such as Microsoft, such as Azure. So, for example, we can plug directly into Azure and guarantee bandwidth into that. And that is something we're starting to see the larger Macs exploring now. So you've got the AWS connector, Azure Express Route, I forget the name of the Google one off the top of my head, but yeah, we are seeing that, and that's ultimately a lot of the value add ISPs compared to people put boxes on the end can add, and it's something that obviously we sell on. Both ways will work, but they have the pros and cons. That answer your question?
I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Lovely. Any more questions? I think we've got 6 minutes left, or is everyone really hankering for lunch? Which is just around the corner.
I think you did really well with the drilling.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. Simon, that's it.
One last question. What's the best way to get OpenReach to actually deliver to against the timeline? Is there a-
Wow, that's a curveball. I think, yeah. So OpenReach are targeted on their installs and also the faults by Ofcom when they get fined, I believe. Again, tell me if I'm wrong here, please, but I believe they get fined if they don't hit those targets, or they could get fined if they don't hit those targets. So ultimately, I know you might not believe me, but generally we don't have that many problems when delivering OpenReach circuits where OpenReach already exists. In particular, I'm in a quite privileged place. Obviously, schools have already got in OpenReach and Virgin into a lot of them, so it's a lot easier to provision with them than it can be sometimes with some altnets, depending on the work that needs to be done. Again, so something to think about if you are going to use an altnet.
It very much depends on the state of BT infrastructure. And you look
Yep.
use BT infrastructure when we're delivering. So if you might have an existing service, but the ducting is collapsed under the road,
Yeah,
still do civils
absolutely.
work, poles
100%.
rot in, they need to replace the pole. That can all add in time into installations. But
Yeah.
pre-survey is very important for installations.
I think our record with BT is about 2 years, 2 months to get a lease line in, as they had to go across a highway to
Yeah,
get
that's
it.
different.
Sorry.
Ballgame.
An unbelievable one.
Yeah, we
That
had one about 2 years, but no claim for only, which nobody would own.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Wayleaves are a nightmare.
Really,
Absolutely. I think one more question, maybe from back.
If you've got backup lines, would you say don't follow the existing rule that one line is?
If you can.
If you can.
If you're going backup and you're using, there's 2 ways to do it. There's an SD-WAN layer 3, which are where you can use whichever cards you want and plug them in. But I would always recommend you, where you can, use different technology or certainly different carriers. So if, for example, for a primary school, if you took an FTTP from OpenReach, FTTP from Freedom Fiber, we get those circuits. Well, not only will you get diversity locally with the fiber route or the fiber ducting, generally speaking, sometimes they may use the same, and there's something called a PIA product, it's a physical infrastructure access product from BT, where, and I know ITS do a lot of this, where they'll blow their own fiber in current BT ducting. So you are actually, even though you're using 2 carriers, OpenReach and ITS, they'll still use an OpenReach ducting product. So if somebody locks that, then you're knackered. But there are plenty of carriers out there and options where the run coming into the building will be different. That's something you should speak to your ISP about, who will ask the question for Freedom Fiber and say, right, hi guys, we want resiliency here. How are you going to get in? They'll say, okay, well, we can go a different way. Might cost £500 more, or you might be able to include it as part of the price. It's just a very good question to ask. I would also say that we have physical interconnects from different carriers. So whenever we provide a primary service and a backup service, we always try to make that as diverse as possible. So we will take a carrier interconnect into one data center and the backup into another data center in case we lose a data center. We use OpenReach for one, Freedom Fiber or Virgin for another as well. We'll look at those ducting routes. But ultimately, again, the value that we or any of our competitors who are here today is they should be able to tell you where your pinch points are going to be. If they can't do that, they don't have leverage with the carrier, and that may bite you later on down the line.
Just how far do you go? Do you go right to a different exchange? You know what I mean? How long do you take?
You can do that, and I think that's going to be work within budget constraints and also the different carriers which are actually available.
Yeah, I've talked to your carrier about it because, for example, when we're designing a network, we work on what we call continuous areas. So, because we predominantly talk about residential side here rather than the sort of business school side. But because talk to our ISP, we're a wholesale provider only, we go back to the nearest exchange and talk to our point of presence. Now, the way we designed our network is areas to physically interconnect. So if that particular exchange goes down, we can hop to the next exchange with very little delay or impact to service. And we're designing that sort of fault tolerance into our network designs. It's always worth talking to the carrier about whether they've done that, how they do it. And with my risk hat on, I just say, it's risk assessing. What do you think is the most likely thing that's going to happen? Is it somebody with a JCB in the streets outside digging up the cable, in which case everything's down the hedge? Yeah. We've had a guy stringing poles and just chopped our fibre off over a BT pole. Stringing the ivy on a pole.
Yeah, that's what good.
Yeah, you know, or Saturday night somebody's careened off the road in their car because they've got a bit too much to drink and taken out the street, putting a cabinet, something like that.
I think all we can do is advise to the best of our abilities to do so. And again, when we work with large mats, that's something we do just to set our expectations on. You do like a matrix of this backup service is there. Okay, that can only go back to one data center. These could be your pinch points.
Yeah, that's how much money you've got to throw a problem, how important that part of the service is compared to something else, like bandwidth compared to resilience. So it's a trade-off somewhere.
Absolutely.
There's infinite pockets on it.
100%. Right, 30 seconds to go. Any quick fire questions from anybody? Fantastic, that was good timing. All right, in that case, thank you very much. If anyone wants to chat with me, it'd be lovely to talk to you later. Thank you for your time.